I did have one, Pastor,
Uh-huh.
and it was about Texas and Mississippi
Go ahead, dear.
and these states that are totally deciding that they're done pretty much trying to contain anything. And
What's your question?
well, I know that we said that we were coming out of this, but I feel like that's overreaction to what the numbers show. I guess I didn't know in context how that made sense.
You mean I was saying we coming out of it? Relationship?
Yeah, and what they're doing.
Okay. If everything was to, if everyone were to fall in line, and everything transpired in an orderly manner, then we would be in the perfect position to say mission accomplished. However, understanding the nature of the human, especially the human who is virtually devoid of wisdom, and knowing that the human who thinks that way also is separated from a sense of compassion, we then understand that when we make a statement like that, it's going to meet resistance. And that resistance comes from those who would give anything to maintain the status quo. Even the lives of others, they would give to maintain the status quo. We are experiencing pushback. Now, having said that, since we made the statements that we made in reference to this thing ending, or the definite need for it to end, what have we experienced? We have experienced a 49% decrease in new cases daily. We have seen an 88% decrease in deaths in nursing home facilities. Infections in nursing home facilities, and 63% decrease in deaths in nursing home facilities. And even knowing the numbers, that's not what we rely on anyway. What we rely on to know that we are on target is what we know the truth to be. And the truth is that we were given specific instructions to dominate the consciousness of this earth. And without regard to the pushback, it is not just our quest or our determination, it is our obligation to follow that command to dominate. When the Creator gives a command and you follow that command, it does not mean that you are not going to receive pushback, but it does mean, without regard to how much you receive, you are going to be victorious. The resistance can come from everyone on the face of the earth, but all of the resistance that comes from every part of this earth cannot overcome the one who has made the determination to dominate the earth consciousness for the benefit of humanity, to be one with the Creator, to be the Creator, to be everything it has been fashioned So what we see with our eyes and what we know with our heart shows us what the eye sees, and that's what we hold on to. Any questions about that, right? Comments? Sometimes it's difficult, but fight we must to hold on to it.
Yeah, no more questions. It's frustrating, because I feel like it's an extreme of what we talked about,
Yeah. Well, and frustration is low-grade anger. So you're a little bit angry. That's all right. You can.
Yeah. I'd read an article last night where the author talks about feeling angry at those who didn't take precautions to help prevent this from getting as bad as it did. And it talks about Vietnam, where they've only had 35 deaths. And, there are these places where people took, their people, regardless of the politics, decided, no, we aren't going to let this happen. And they took the concerted effort to keep everyone safe.
Right.
And then there are these countries that didn't do that. And the sense of feeling very angry at those who chose not to.
And if you really look at the countries who did not do that, you will see there are 43 countries in Europe who has a marked increase in infection rate. Most of those are in Eastern Europe. It's in Central and Eastern Europe. And the reason is because they have the same mentality as does the governor of Texas, Alabama, and South Carolina. So those mentalities are the ones that we know of. There are others who are quietly doing what they are doing. But again, it doesn't matter. The media, sometimes the reports that come are reports that will cause us to be discouraged or to be frustrated. Yet, we cannot allow ourselves to go to that place. These things are designed to make us stronger, not to weaken our resolve. And there are moments when we have to remind ourselves through verbal speech as opposed to mental thought that we are the ones who are the creators. We are the ones who are the wall to protect us of our brothers. We are the ones who keep humanity safe from itself. And we understand that the Governor Abbott in Texas is not the problem. The problem is the guy who's called greed. Greed and hatred are the issues. And quite frankly, America has become the Garden of Eden in many, many ways in my mind. And what I mean by that is America is the genesis of so many problems in this earth. And the perpetual thing of those things that do not hold life dear, does not hold life as being something to be preserved and nurtured. But it sees life as a means of profit. As long as I can keep people living and desiring to have things, I can continue to grow. It's the attitude of America. And because of this greed and because of this hatred and all of the things that are totally distasteful and detrimental to life as we know it, America becomes the best place to be because it affords us the greater opportunity to be able to wrought change that's meaningful, that's more visible, and that has the power to change the course of the entire earth. the epicenter of greed is where we live. And all of us know that. So if we are in the epicenter of greed and hatred, then when that changes, it moves exponentially, the energy of it, throughout the earth. Excuse me. There is no part of this nation or the thought patterns or the evilness of this nation that won't be ripened at the right time, and this is the right time to bring ripeness. So when I say that America, to me, is in essence the Garden of Eden, or that garden where good and evil exists across the wall from or outside of the gate of life itself. The question becomes, how did we get to this place, and how did this get to be this garden thingy, when, if you look at it geographically, it appears as though it would be in Kurdistan, north of Iraq, the garden thing, if you look at it geographically, between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. How does that happen? Well, this idea of the garden, this space of creation, of the space rather to place created beings, is not a geographical location as much as it is a conceptual truth. And it being a conceptual truth, then we look at it through the lens that we did last week when we talked about the duality of life itself. This entity that's placed in that garden space, even if we look at it in this nation, life was really flourishing in this nation. And earth was being taken care of, cultivated, and the animals and the inhabitants of this mass of land were one with each other. There was no overkill at all, and no one had a deed to any land because it belonged to everyone. And people lived lives that would maintain the earth itself and at the same time sustain life in every form. But then something happened. An entity landed on the shores. And this entity that landed on the shores was looking for something. And the something that it was looking for was itself. And in looking for itself, it got lost in what it saw and began to claim everything for itself. This entity did not come into being for the purpose of destruction. It came into being for the purpose of balance. What I am saying is this. If you put a pin in what I just said and look at this for a moment, suppose that there is this mass of land. And in this mass of land, there is something called wisdom. And this wisdom is dark. And this wisdom covers the deep, covers the disorder at all. And this wisdom begins to take the form of a human. And in doing so, there are portions of it that begins to separate from it. And what I mean by that is this: it becomes less and less effective as it spreads itself over everything and begins to take this human form. And in taking the human form, the further it moves away from its origin, the less it becomes recognizable as wisdom, because the further it moves away from its origin, the more it becomes what it desires to be or wants to be, selfish. And then it ends up in another mass of land when it reaches its highest state of selfishness and its farthest distance from what it was originally created to be. And then it begins to spread like a plague to other places, and it ends up on the shores of this massive land where life is taking place in rhythm with everything around it. And it disrupts that rhythm. And in disrupting that rhythm, it begins to show its true nature: greed, lack of compassion, vicious, violent, no sense of its purpose in the earth, creating its own form of righteousness, or creating its own form of wisdom. And that wisdom taking on a form that says that the wisest thing that you can do is take everything you can and label it as yours and destroy anyone who makes any efforts to reclaim what belongs to them or to live in that space that you have called your own. When that happens, this thing begins to grow out of control. And what makes it grow out of control is that those who have opened their arms to it and allowed it to come into its midst and have nurtured it so it would not die, finds out that this has become their enemy. And now the viciousness of that presence begins to destroy the very fiber of that community, of the communities that live on this massive land. And as it begins to destroy it, it seeks to make those inhabitants work for it, because it does not know how to do anything for itself. It can't even take a buffalo and make a tent, or it can't even preserve the meat from the buffalo to live through the winter. So it forces it to others to do it for them. And then all of a sudden it finds itself left all alone, because those who inhabit the land are able to escape and to live separate from them and refuse to come in contact with them anymore. So now what happens is those who were left in that place of desolation and that place that's devoid of compassion and wisdom brings more people to the shore. And in doing so, it also brings with it people who have come from the origin of all of mankind, the dark people. And they become enslaved in this land. And this land now has everything that it needs to bring order to the earth consciousness. It has in its midst people who have been smashed, beaten down to pretty much nothing, and placed in different corners of this massive land. And with this comes these dark people who are slaves, the wisdom that brought forth everything in this earth, shackled rather by those who are representative of rightness and unrightness, selfishness and greed. And rather than be vicious and violent and destroy those who shackled it, this wisdom becomes humble and forgiving because that's his nature. It does not know how to destroy life and take pride and joy in being able to do it, because it is life itself. It is a sustainer. So it forgives in order to sustain. And it moves to a place where it becomes the controller of the earth and really a spiritual eyesore because of the pain and suffering that it has wrought on those it brought to this land, those who were found in this land, and everyone else who doesn't look like it. And the reason it happens this way is because it, again, is devoid of compassion. It does not understand the nature of its origin. So it forces everything to submit to it and does everything it can to force everything to see it as being the journey of righteousness, when really it is total unrighteousness. So a period comes when the eye of a few of those who are enslavers, those who are devoid of wisdom, their eyes, they see a glimpse of wisdom, and they begin to embrace it, and it begins to grow until the shackles fall are taken away from those who were forcibly brought to this place. And now here we are, skipping from that period to this period, we see the same energy that is permeating the land. The difference is that there are a group of people in the land who realizes that it doesn't take thousands now, it doesn't take tens of thousands. It simply takes desire of a few. And that desire is to understand the origin of life itself and the order of wisdom and how it functions. And when that begins to take place, things begin to change. The sectors of that society that's called religion begins to be reevaluated. And in doing so, you see that sector that's called religion is simply an arm of greed designed to maintain not order as much as the power and control of those who are devoid of wisdom and those who are violent and brutal and greedy. And in reevaluating it, that group begins to see that it does not need a megaphone, because it is a megaphone that speaks, and everyone hears it in the depths of their heart and began to desire the exposure of everything that needs to be changed. And all of a sudden, on the horizon, you begin to see greed take a front seat, hatred takes a front seat. The lies of religion stands tall, and the manipulation of government is seen clearer than ever before. And all of a sudden, the energy of those who brought this through their desires is beginning to touch the depths of the souls of those who are descendants of those who represent good and evil, unripeness and ripeness. And when their souls began to be touched, they joined with those who are descendants of wisdom. And together, they began to form a union. And in forming that union, it brings about a desire for balance for humanity, even though it's called equality and justice. Excuse me. And in order for this to penetrate the hearts of the masses, things have to take place like murders by police officers who were actually slave patrollers. Things have to take place like plagues so that people can be unemployed and know what it feels like to be hungry and homeless, to know what it feels like to live from paycheck to paycheck, and at the same time viewing what's taking place in the streets, the brutal murder of those who were brought here in shackles, a desire to destroy them, yet at the same time lying about their love for them, and then beginning to see the pillars of religion crumble because men are beginning to see from their souls that this thing called religion has no redeeming values at all. It simply is an element of enslavement itself. And now what happens is there is a fight to hold on to this religion and risk the lives of people in the midst of a plague to maintain the structure. And at the same time, the government seeks to protect the businesses that are making efforts to make all the money it can off of the suffering of humanity as a whole. And here we are in the midst of it all. And because of the desires, the unicity between the descendants of wisdom and those who want to see things change in terms of an end to the pandemic and what they call a return to normal. They want to see this take place. However, those who are descendants of wisdom see it differently. The normalcy that they're searching for never existed. However, the descendants want normalcy to prevail. And they also know that in order for any semblance of it to be seen, there must be an end to a pandemic, an end to this plague. And that declaration has been made even without seeing what it's going to look like, made because of the oneness that these descendants know it has with the universe itself, knowing that everything in this earth consciousness, everything that exists has its origin in the womb of the universe. And in recognizing that, it cries out to the universe in an attempt to be one with it, but not knowing what that feels like, looks like, or what the outcome is going to be. And finally, even not being able to explain it or to paint a picture of what it looks like, knowing that this oneness has always been there. It was blocked by this belief that we are mere human, as opposed to understanding that we are one with the universe. We are the universe, and this idea of being human is an illusion that we have bought into because of what we see with the eyes that we were given, and not understanding that these bodies that make us think we are human are representative of this wisdom, the dark wisdom, the wisdom of life itself, and it moves, and I'm sorry, and it begins to devolve into something that is confused, that has a lack of empathy, a lack of sympathy, a lack of any type of compassion. And that devolution is seen not as people, but as concepts. And those conceptual ideals that keeps this earth in turmoil is beginning to change, not because the perpetuators wanted to change. It's changing out of necessity because of the pressures that's applied to it by those who recognize that they are the universe. Not only they, but every entity that calls itself human is not human. It is a part of the universe itself. It is life itself, but it doesn't recognize it. And the further it gets away from this recognition, the more different it looks than what it was in the beginning. And now everything is coming full circle. And this idea, this concept of coming full circle says that the change is not on the horizon. The change is unfolding before our eyes. And the term for that from humanity and those who seek to maintain the status quo is called the browning of America, when that is really simply a concept that speaks to a greater truth. And that greater truth speaks to the idea of the balancing of humanity, the harmony of humanity. And I know there are those who would say, but we see the browning of America. No, that's what you perceive it to be. That's what you think it is. That's not what it is. Keep in mind that the whole concept of race and black and brown people and the Chinese, the terminology used to separate people did not come from the source of life and wisdom. It came from those who had principles that were devoid of compassion and that saw itself being better than, superior to everything and everyone else, and force people to believe that it is right simply because it says it's right, and that it is the voice of the Creator, and it has labeled itself as being the power and of religion and the wisdom of the universe, even though it has no clue as to what the universe actually is or what its purpose is or what it does for that matter. So we have to look at these things beyond the eyes of the enslaver, beyond the eyes of good and evil. We have to see these things from the eye. And when we see it through the eye, what we see is life. When we see it through the eyes, what we see is good and evil. What we see is different races. We see greed. We see my property, your property. We see I am better than you because I have more money than you. I'm superior to you because I have a degree. I'm superior to you because my skin tone is different than yours. I'm superior to you because the grade of my hair is different than yours. I'm superior to you, and he goes on and on and on and on. However, wisdom says stop. Pause. It is impossible to be superior to anyone because all of us are one. These things are illusions, and they are distractions that renders us impotent in relationship to what we were created to be. It takes away all of the powers of our being. It robs us of an opportunity to live in harmony and bring these vessels that we call bodies to a place of harmony with the universe itself. And you say, well, how is that possible to bring these bodies to a place of harmony with the universe itself. What does that look like? And I say to you, it looks like resurrection. And you say, but we have to die in order for that to happen. And I say, you're absolutely right, but we don't have to die in the manner that you think we have to die. We simply have to die to the principles that keeps us living in this world of illusions and distractions and begin to embrace the reality, the essence of who we are. And then we have those experiences that Jesus had, because we, at that point, are resurrected, meaning that we are brought to life. We are brought back to life, and we begin to see things that we never saw before. We begin to see that the idea of the concept from the beginning of being one flesh, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, is simply saying we are identical. And that identical is just not just talking about the man and the one man. It's just talking about the spiritual being. The energy of the being is identical to each other. They just have different functions, and there is no such thing as a race of people. There is simply spiritual being, period, who habitate these things called bodies. And the reason these bodies are the way they are in terms of being sickly and weakened is simply because the life that's in these bodies does not recognize who it is, and it sees these bodies as being everything that we are supposed to be, and see these bodies as being God, when it is the God that habitates the body. It is not, the body is not the God. The body is simply the temple that the gods live in. And if you think that the body is the God, then when the body dies, where does the God go? To dust. This is the temple. If this is the temple, and the life of the temple lives in the temple, then the body becomes something different. It is overtaken by the Spirit, meaning that it is able to move as was Jesus after resurrection. Not because it has been nailed to a cross, but simply because it has made sacrifices. And the sacrifices that it has made are the principles that has kept it in this place of slavery, that has kept it in this place of bondage, that has kept it from being the God that it is. And it has it saying things like, there are periods when I feel like I am one with, or I feel like I am Elohim. And there are periods when it's not. As opposed to saying I am Elohim without regard to what my experiences are in this body, without regard to the distractions that I fall prey to at times, I still know who I am. And in embracing that, we get to that place where we are we're no longer led down a pathway of anger when we see things that are happening that are different than they should be. What I mean is when we see things that are perpetuated against a group of people because their skin looks different, we don't experience that anger anymore. We are more encouraged to be the light and the enlightenment and be cognizant of the wisdom that we are, so that we can manifest ways to open the eye of all of those who are perpetuators of these brutal things, these acts of these barbaric acts, these entities that present themselves as being savages are not. They really aren't. They are simply the unripened tree. And we cannot become unripened in order to fight the tree or to change the direction of the tree. You can't do that. Unripened. If you are ripened, you can't become unripened. You become rotten. And when you are rotten, you are not good for nutrition. You have no nutritional value. No one wants to partake of you when you are rotten fruit. When you are ripened, you cannot become unripened. You become rotten. You deteriorate. So when you ripen, when you give off this gas that ripens the unripened fruit, this is love. Love covers a multitude of sins. Love covers the unrightness. It brings about a sense of rightness, and that is the reason it is so deeply embedded in those who are subjugated, or who've been subject to brutality, to have such depths of hearts of forgiveness and loving kindness, because it has no choice. It knows from the depth of its soul, but not from its brain, that this loving kindness and forgiveness is no different than the gas that ripens the unripened apple. It's the language of spiritual ripeness. Love is the language of spiritual ripeness. It is this thing that helps us to see that there are no spaces between us. The space that appears to be between us is simply an illusionary thing. So the idea of a couple of people in a couple of states having the power to destroy or to increase or to reignite the destruction of a virus, to reignite the destruction of a plague, cannot be, because those voices are the voices crying out for help, and they don't even know it. They are voices that's fighting desperately to hold on to what's familiar to them, not knowing what's greater than all of us. Not knowing that the thing that's greater than all of us is knowing who we are. And if our anger remains, or if our anger rises every time that something happens, that's when we are covering the mirror and they can't see. They can't see who they're supposed to be, because we are the mirror. When you see the blemish on your face, you try to fix it. So when you become that mirror of loving kindness, and they see that loving kindness, and there's a difference that they're experiencing, then the desirable thing is loving kindness, not hatred and anger. We cannot be dubious about who we are and where we are headed. We cannot allow those principles that are antithetical to what we know the truth to be. We cannot allow them to survive unchecked. There is no balance if we are not balanced. Notice what I said. There is no balance if we are not balanced. I did not say balanced. I said balance. Are there any questions or comments? I know I've been talking for a minute.
Now, this is Barbara. I have one comment. When you talk about fruit that's ripened cannot become unripened again, but it rots. even when the fruit rots and it falls to the ground, it's not destroyed. It's simply repurposed. The energy is reformed so that it becomes the word I'm trying to use is it becomes nourishment for other fruit to begin to bear and bring forth out of the ground again. So it's never destroyed, even though it did not perform its purpose at the time. There are other opportunities for it to support life and therefore be life again.
And see, Barbara, when we look at those who sought to pick up arms to bring about balance or change, equality or justice, however you determine, that is also seen when we think about what the Civil Rights Movement did, looking in the places of injustice for justice. That fruit rotten, and because of it, the energy of it was not destroyed. We have that energy, but we are repurposing it now. Is that the same thing as you were saying, Barbara?
Yeah.
And in repurposing it, it becomes even more powerful, bringing about the change, bringing about not so much the change as is the understanding and of the need for harmony, and honestly, harmony, justice, equality are traits that everyone cries for, but no one seems to know what it looks like or feels like. I saw a post, and in this post, this kid was asking, there was an African kid talking with a Caucasian male adult. And the kid asked the adult, would you like to live to be 100? And the Caucasian adult says, yes, everybody would like to live to be 100, but I doubt that I will. And the kid says, would you like to live to be 100 being black, or live to be 50 being white? And the Caucasian adult male looked at the kid, dropped his head, and walked away. What do you think that answer was? I would rather die white at 50 than to live black to be 100. That's the principle that was put in place based upon the knowledge of good and evil. That's the unripeness that has to be ripened. Because life is chosen based on race. Why? Because the hardships of the African are there purposely in order to keep confusion, contradictions, and all the other things that keeps us off balance, keep it in play. But when we begin to see that life is not based upon material gain, life is not based upon skin color, life is not determined by who's accepted and who is not. The wisdom of life recognizes life as life, be it the life of a bird, the life of a human. For the scripture clearly states in Isaiah, that to kill a bullock is no different than killing a man. Therefore, I ask no sacrifice, says the Lord. So what I'm saying is this. The only prize that we keep the eye on is knowing who we are, knowing that we are Elohim. There are no prizes to be attained in this earth that speaks to life itself. Everything that speaks to life is spiritual. Separate from that, there is existence. There is no living. Right now, all of us can name people whose greatest desire in life is to be extremely financially wealthy, not just secure, but wealthy. And for what purpose? So that they can feel like they have been accepted, not by society, but not only that, but they also make them feel like they have become a part of the society that they want to be accepted by, only to find out that without regard to what you possess, you are still no different than what they perceive you to be. And you'll never be any different because you perceive yourself to be the same thing. The perception that you have of yourself is who you are to yourself. So when that changes and we begin to see that the only true perception that we should have of who we are is the perception that was given to us when we were created, and that in itself is the image of our Creator. And in doing so, we see that this idea of unicity, this idea of oneness, goes far beyond what we are, who we are, in regards to this universe. Goes far beyond that. Because without our existence, there is no universe. And without the universe, there is no existence of us. Because we are indeed one. Questions, comments, please.
Yeah, good morning, Pastor Richard and everyone. You know, I think in what you have shared with us is that I think is our desire, you know, for everyone to come to the truth and the knowledge of who they are. And I know for, you know, myself, you know, I come to know that I am Elohim. And I think the desire is now is to walk in the authority of Elohim, you know, and I think that's, you know, again, a point of, you know, beginning, you know, that for me is important because I know who I am, but the authority and just knowing that you have to not walk as mere man, but walk as the spirit and the power that you are. So I just wanted to share that thought in terms of just the, you know, walking in the authority of Elohim. I'm done.
Okay, George. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Any other comments or questions?
And Pastor, I'm sorry. I just wanted to just say in peace, loving kindness, and forgiveness.
George, what are you apologizing for? George,
okay, well, no apologies.
Thank you.
Walking in that authority of peace, loving kindness, and forgiveness. I'm done.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else? All of us are on this line, in this earth. All of us are in this place together. No apologies necessary for comments, questions, whatever. Because we do this together. You hear me talking, but what I am saying is impossible without you guys. I feed from your energy even if you're not saying anything. So no, please don't apologize. Anyone else?
I have a comment or question, and it's not pertaining to what we just talked about, but how can we deal with the rise in gas prices?
Desire. The same way we deal with everything else. Make our desires known, and that desire is obvious. That there needs to be a balance, a decrease in it so people can afford it. That help you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let me back all the way up. Rainier, does that help you in terms of the question you raised in the beginning?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Terrific. Anyone else?
Pastor, I have something I like to tie in, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it. I saw something when you were talking about the Spirit hovering or moving over the surface of the deep. And that made me think of something. I mentioned, it amazes me when I discover something about myself, when I see something that kind of fascinates me. And I had one of those such moments this week. I mentioned this to Pastor. You have that antagonistic voice that's in you, the one that disagrees with everything, and hopefully by now a lot of us have learned to subdue that or to deal with it. But to me, it still raises itself sometimes, that disagreeable side of me, and that never wants to see the light of anything, that frustrates me about myself. And I had an encounter this week. I was looking at something and I felt that. And all of a sudden I recognized something. The voice is mine, but it didn't sound like me. It sounds like a part of me, but not me. But I'm familiar with it because it's been there, and I always, are used to it. The other thing that I recognized about it was, how do I say this? It was me in a different complexion, in a different way. And I recognized that. And it made me think that you are every man, and your personalities and all these, your egos and your thoughts and all these things that you grasp onto and become a part of you, make up who you are and influence your thoughts and your actions. But every one of it is every man. And I could see that so clearly. And looking at this thing where it talks about the Spirit of God moving upon the surface of the deep, you talked about the wisdom coming out of this and taking on the image of a man. Well, the darkness part of it is, if you dare to go deeper, the darker it becomes. But if you take your wisdom off the top of the surface of this, it's going to be lighter, and it's not going to contain as much wisdom. And maybe that shallow part of us is what we're used to living in. Maybe that shallow part of us is what keeps us from seeing things the way as clearly as we should see them. I saw that the other day in me when I'm talking about the complexion of it. It was a shallow part of me. And I recognize that, and I'm thinking, you know what, I don't know how and when that got there. Did I consciously put it there, or has it always been there since I was a kid? I don't know. But I saw that, and I kind of equated to the moving of over the surface of the waters, and I see that now. And I even the thought that when you were talking made me think of John when he talks about stirring. The angel has to come up and stir up the waters. Maybe what we're doing now is stirring up the waters, because the stirring of the waters heals what is bothering you. Each and every one of us that has an affliction, or that has, and I'm talking spiritual now, not physical, if we are in the right place at the right time, if we see this and understand what it's saying from a spiritual perspective, I think we're living in that now, and I think we are the word, because the angel is the word, that truth that's coming about, that's stirring up the waters. And I kind of saw that when you talked about it, or I see it in myself. And we've said, we said for years, and Evelyn even talked about it last week, the thing that irks her, she sees it in her. I agree with that in principle because you say it, but I see it now because I experienced it. And I guess, in a sense, I feel like I'm the one that you had to leave the 99 to go back and get. But I see that now in a whole different light. And so what you said this morning kind of made sense, and I see the importance of what we talk about, no matter how controversial it is, and making it real and putting it out there, because it's life changing. And I just want to add that, because it kind of something I lived this week, and it just kind of fit into what you said this morning.
Well, the idea of the concept of being shallow, taking it from the top of the darkness, making the wisdom shallow wisdom. What we've talked about in the past is that race is a made-up thing, and groups of people are more representative of concepts than they are of being, human as we see humans as being. So what I'm saying is this: that being the case, then the thoughts of antagonism. What are the principles, rather, that antagonizes? Maybe I should put it this way: the principles that antagonizes people. Where do they come from? What are the most antagonizing principles in your life? What are the principles? What are the things? What are the actions, the deeds that antagonize you more than anything else? I think that this is how the conversation started. When Urania was expressing her frustration about what's taking place, these are principles, or that is a principle that antagonized her. What principle is that? I have no regard for life, so we're going to open up everything regardless of what may happen. That's antagonizing. To see a man's knee on a man's neck, that's antagonizing. These are the antagonizing principles. And if all of us are one, then that antagonizing principle of Chauvin with his knee on Floyd's neck, that antagonizing principle is also us. And it is represented by something that doesn't look like us in the physical because it is so foreign to our nature. Does that make sense to you? Ron in particular, the rest of us in general?
Yes. I think it sums it up well.
And what do we do about that? If it's antagonistic, then that means it is unripened. So yes, there is pain when we see that taking place. How do we keep it? How do we prevent that from continuing? We can't keep it from continuing if we put our knee on somebody's neck who looks like the one who put their knee on somebody's neck who looks like us. We expose it. We be expressive of the pain and suffering that comes from it. And at the same time, understanding that the law of the land has remedies for that. Let that play out. However, from the depth of our soul, we understand that the one with the knee on the neck is more in need of loving kindness than the one who's dying. Because it has no sense of what life is. It has no compassion at all for anything that looks different than it. So it is attempting to kill what truth, what wisdom is, because it doesn't look like it. And it doesn't realize that you are death itself, because your attempt to destroy what you came from is an attempt to destroy yourself. The very thing that you detest is the thing that brought you life. Without it, you wouldn't exist. And without it, you cannot exist. So when you saw the antagonizing thoughts as you did, what you were seeing is humanity crying out to be what it was created to be. You saw something that we are desiring for everyone to see. You looked in a mirror, and in that mirror, you saw the very thing that you detested is you. So now you have to bring rightness to that so that you can be one with the universe as opposed to being resistant to the universe. Can you see that? We have to begin.
Yes.
Excuse me. We have to begin to think beyond race. We have to do that. We cannot be apprehensive about speaking to it and what it represents. We cannot be fearful of quote-unquote antagonizing someone with the truth. Because if the truth antagonizes you, then you are living a lie. The truth should resonate with you if you're looking for the truth. If you are in search of the truth, if you desire truth, it should resonate. However, if it doesn't, if it's antagonizing, you have a problem. And there is some self-examination that needs to take place. You are the serpent. Why do I say that? Because the serpent is a symbol of self-deception. And you are deceiving yourself. If you think that you are right, and yet you are uncomfortable or you are antagonized by the truth. Think about the number of people who are engaged in what is called a religious journey, and the truth antagonizes them. The truth antagonizing them, angering them, speaks volumes about who they are in terms of their ignorance about who they are and what they are supposed to be teaching and the journey they are supposed to be on. That is one of the reasons the thing that we call church is simply a business that uses religious principles to justify its existence. And the reason it functions like that is because the ones who set this thing up called church are all about business. They're all about making money. And you cannot remove yourself from the root from which you sprung. There's no fruit in these religious settings. There's only profit. And because it works hand in hand with government, the government says you don't have to pay us to exist. Your existence keeps us alive, so you don't pay taxes. You don't pay us to exist. Everyone else does. You just keep them in check. And the CEO makes all the money and decisions, controls and manipulates everything. And that itself is the definition, the classical definition of self-deception. Because you are fooling no one except yourself. Even in those settings, you know things are not right, but you keep going. You're fooling yourself. It's going to get better. It's not going to get better. You on this phone, ask yourself this question. How many settings have you been in that you were a quote-unquote member of? And how many how many pastors have you sat under? How many pastoral administrations you've been a part of, and nothing changed? It is no different than how the government has functioned all of these years, and nothing has changed. The principle, the idea, the concept of talking about improving the police department is not going to happen. Why? Because the police department is doing exactly what it was set up to do. It cannot be improved upon. It has to be changed totally. The foundational principle of the police department is to patrol and destroy the African. The slave patrols, the same principle. Return them to the prison or to the plantation. It can't be improved upon. It has to be totally revamped. The system that talks about voting has to be totally revamped. Why? Because the principles right now were set up the way they are for the purpose of suppressing. Read the section, I forget the section of the Constitution that deals with the idea of voting. It gives the states the permission to set the time, the place, and the method of voting, with one caveat. That caveat being unless Congress passes a law saying otherwise. That's the caveat. And right now, we're in the midst of that caveat being exercised. If there is never a stimulus bill passed, a rescue package, or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. What matters is that system being changed. It's more important for H.R. 1 to pass than it is that stimulus bill. Our focus is getting that through. Why? Because that's one of the changes we're talking about. That's one of the things that can bring harmony. I said to you some time ago that this thing of harmony is not going to be everybody walking around hugging each other and kissing and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be systemic changes made. And the major systemic change has to be H.R. 1, the one that deals with voter registration. And you say you're talking politics, You doggone skippy I am. Because without the government, your life doesn't exist in this earth the way it does. It has become such an intricate part of our lives. Keep in mind, there has always been government. It just has not been this way. The Native American had government in their nation. The Africans has government in its nations. There's always been government. It's how it functions. So this antagonism is seen in the police department. This antagonism is seen in voter suppression. And this antagonism can be ripened by revamping the police department, by bringing into existence this bill, these principles that govern the way people vote. These are the changes that that renders the society impotent when it comes to manipulation and suppression. It brings strength and power to harmony, to humanity. Any questions or comments about that? Ron, does that help you? Any questions or comments?
No, that helps. Thank you.
Let me say this in conclusion, unless there's someone named Sheldon who just who got something to say. This idea of the real. Have you, if you know anything or heard anything about building a ship? Ships are built foundationally, and the sides of the ship are built with ribs. The rib of the ship holds the skin of the ship, and without that, there is no ship. The idea of the rib is more of a message to the Adam, and that message to the Adam is saying something. That message is saying, without this energy, you don't exist. There is total chaos if you don't respect this energy and recognize it for what it is. This idea of taking the real. I want to make you aware of where your strength is. You have a choice. You can embrace this strength, or you can manipulate this strength. And in doing so, you can weaken your existence. And that's the principle involved when we talk about the idea and the strength and power of embracing the feminine in the way that it should be. And maybe at some point in the future we can discuss that at length. I want to, if there are questions, of course I'll answer them. But if not, I'll leave you with that. Comment.
I was going to say, so you don't want us to comment further on the rib either?
Go ahead. Mr. Sheldon.
It is more important, more integral to the survival of humankind, and to stay in touch for it actually to see the physical manifestation of the woman, which is the real, which is the foundation, which is the support. And without that, there is no survival. There is no identity. It is, you talk about building the ship. You talk about, if you think about building a house, building anything. It is the ribs, which are the foundation, the innermost part, and it is the first part to be created and built, and it is upon that structure that everything else rests. Even looking at it from that standpoint, in terms of being the innermost, it is also the oldest, and in other terms, it as Pastor just said, it is the strength. When we talk about the house that was built upon sand and the house that was built upon solid ground, when you think about humankind, you think about, I mean, just thinking about the species in general. For mankind to try to go forward and persist without acknowledging and embracing the feminine is the equivalent of extracting a house on sandy ground, on a beach, so to speak. I guess there's a lot of thoughts. Are there any questions or comments at this particular point as it involves the rib, even how the rib was traditionally or religiously, I would say, viewed, and how that has been misinterpreted and completely wrong to the point where it's the opposite in symbolism?
Yeah, Sheldon, I have a comment on it. It talks about a rib, and it also, I didn't know if you're going to discuss the part where, because part of that definition talks about being a chamber. Are you looking at that as well?
Not at this particular moment. I know I looked at it a few weeks ago, but
Okay.
going back there now as we discussed it.
Okay. This thing is just so much more than, you know, that originally is written in the pages, and as you're saying, and as Pastor said, we could talk about this. This is another lesson within itself to go into, to look at this, what this feminine imagery is that Adam was or is, and that is to this day, I think, not recognized in its fullest form. But go ahead and continue, please. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not a problem at all. I think it's absolutely very important that is mentioned in terms of, because that was totally missed in a religious setting. And even the word itself also means beams. So the entire time from this original concept when it was first said, or its original intention, had all to do from strengthening. And then contrary to that, of course, we look at it from a physical standpoint. And from a physical standpoint, just in terms of strength, of course, the man is stronger just from a genetic standpoint. But the Holy Scriptures actually considered the woman to represent this being, the source of power, the source of stability, which is once you see it and understand it for the first time, it is something that it is definitely shocking and awing all at the same time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the word is used as you are using it, where it talks about Noah's Ark, and the building of the ark is used as, talking about the ribs of the ship. And it's also used in talking about the building of the temple. and all the chambers that were in the temple. And it talks about opening or spreading something out to see what and how it is intended to be used or should be used or could be used. So, and I'm not sure we're looking at it from the same perspective, but that said a mouthful to me, that if you look at this thing through your eyes, you see that this rib can be manipulated and do what you want to do with it and use it for your own selfish purposes. And she becomes something that is secondary to you and not bringing you balance, and something that is just for physical pleasure to you rather than bringing spiritual balance. But if you see it from your eye, you see spiritually there is no limit to you, and the universe is open to you. If you look at the fact that you are not stronger than her, you are her balance, and she brings a strength in her own right, but her strength is purely spiritual. So she is what helps you see that this journey you're on, be it made human, you are the spiritual being, and that is the balance that she helps you to see and move in that direction. So the limit is taken away from the human, and seeing the boundlessness that is offered if you embrace that feminine aspect of self. And that's totally this. Like I said, we could talk for some length on this.
Yeah, and if it helps with anyone in terms of how they traditionally, or how we, I should say, because I believe probably just about everyone on the phone has at one time or another been told or saw it as the woman is supposed to support the man. The support this is talking about is more so of the support that one might have with someone that it confides in to get his strength. That is the support in terms of building up and turning towards turning to the eye, not the eyes, opening us up to the realization of who and what we are. A guide, even when the scriptures talk about wisdom, and even in the Greek it translates with Sophia, that in itself deals with the feminine aspect. It deals with the, like I said, the older, more knowledgeable, and when I say more knowledgeable, I mean closer to the what we are spiritually, our true identity. Not so temporal. Matter of fact, when you think of going back to the building and the ship, once you have erected that rib, once you have erected that structure, it pretty much any thing can be put on top of it or changed, etc. Even when you're rehabilitating a house, bones or the structure of the house, you can change the outer part of it, but it's that structure that stands. It's that structure where the depth is. Coming from the south, you think about the structure of the house in the springs and everything, but below the house. It is the one that maintains, is long lasting, and upkeeps everything. I know it's a mouthful, and we're kind of talking metaphorically, but that's what the rib stands for. It was definitely an opportunity that, of course, was also absolutely missed by some.
Anyone else? Because I think that's something that we probably should look at as the as an entire discussion for the hour or whatever time it takes. I'll probably talk with you after Sheldon about looking at that, because I think it's a ripe time for us to delve much deeper into that. Okay.
Okay. Well, but
Right.
definitely before we go forward, and definitely we're open to any other questions or comments, anything like that. Before I go on, was there anything else about the real? Any questions or thoughts whatsoever?
I have
All
questions,
right.
but I'm not, I'm not sure where, I'm not sure how to put it into words, but it should definitely be a topic for another day.
Well, I think another day, Audrey, could be tomorrow.
Yeah. But what you said was people misinterpreted, but my thinking was not only misinterpreted, but exploited.
Yes.
So that just started me to thinking about it all. Anyway.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when Pastor was talking about religion and the priesthood earlier today, and about a lot of times the ignorance of the parishioners. And when we say ignorant, we definitely don't. That doesn't mean dumb. That just means not knowing and not having knowledge of something at that particular time. Absolutely not capable. We're not talking about a not capable, stupid, or dumb, anything like that. We make that very clear. But when he talked about the preachers exploiting and trying to get money, etc., for something for their own selfish gain, it was the same exact thing during the time of Jesus. He was trying to speak to the regular people who were not necessarily under um, the same intentions, trying to do the same thing, um, but thought they were doing the right thing, and more so being exploited and misled. Um, and the reason why he's so hard on times, just in case anyone is wondering, on preachers, because it is a difference from being misled and actually having a desire and kind of like being sent in circles and purposely being taken advantage of, and then that of someone who knows better, doesn't believe anything that they are actually saying, but using all those words for selfish, personal gain. And so it becomes something totally different from the person who is following, trying to do the right thing or think they're doing what they're supposed to do. And even if they want to believe in something and having a hard time believing it, then someone who just doesn't believe it altogether at all and is only telling people they should do this thing for their own personal gain. So there is a huge difference. Many of us have been that parishioner who, in a sense, has been walking around in circles. And I say all that to say, yes, um, that is absolutely, those scriptures have been misled a lot in the past to manipulate, take advantage, exploit, and subjugate people for personal gain, for personal interest. Any thoughts or questions on that topic? there isn't any thing, and I'm not ending everything we talked about. It was just one more thing that I wanted to comment on, and it was earlier this morning when Ron was speaking about having the conversation with himself, and it was apparent, and it seemed, I guess, kind of odd that he would have this conversation where it's with himself, where he was on two sides, but then found himself on one side, questioning the side that he's typically on. That's the same thing that Jesus was doing in Matthew at the beginning of chapter 4 when he was being tempted, at least how we were taught, being tempted by the devil, the slanderer, the enemy. It is that part of the self that is comfortable and tied to human existence. It tries to defend human existence, the validity of human existence, and doesn't want to acknowledge that we are beyond human existence. In a way, it is arguing against who and what we are for its own purpose and survival. It is the same reason why human beings fear death. That is the same portion. Some call it the ego, and say you have to put your ego in check. But it's also the part.
How much is a whole pizza?
It is the part.
Good. I'm sorry. Hi. How are you, man? I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Can you
how much is a whole pepperoni?
Can you mute your phone, please?
How much? Go ahead.
Mute your phone, please.
How much is a whole pepperoni?
Can you mute your phone, please?
Oh, don't mute your phone. Share the pizza with the rest of us.
Okay, he muted. Sorry. Well, not sorry, but to continue. So that ego part that we're talking about, though, is the same part that just sees us as human, and it wants to support itself. It wants to believe that it is human, that we are human, and then it fights for that. That's the reason why with Jesus in chapter 4 of Matthew, he said, okay, you hungry. Okay, if you say who you are, make this stone into some food. You've been fasting all this time and you're starving, you're hungry. That is to try to prove to the self that Jesus was human, and that all this other stuff that he had supposedly been preaching and believing at a particular point, telling the people about him and his father were one and things like that, he was questioning his very belief in that. That's Jesus was going through what many of us go through on a regular basis, or definitely have at least gone through in the past. But that's what that was. When we think about the enemy, we think about the devil, it is the idea and urge to only see ourselves as human. That is what that conversation is. But I just wanted to make that parallel. Thank you, Ron, for sharing that earlier. Are there any questions or thoughts about that?
Thank you for the clarity. Yeah.
Well, that's all. Yeah, that's all I had at the moment.
Okay, well, we'll pick up here tomorrow, Sheldon.
Okay.
Ron, Audrey,
Okay.
all the rest of us. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow on the phone then.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Take care,
Have a great
everybody.
day.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
all.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.